Hi, everybody. Thank you so much for tuning in to Actually Caucasian Interviews, where I find interesting people to talk to, ethnic Caucasians, about their life, their ideas, their journey with culture in this modern world that we're living in. Today I have Jonti coming on. I'm very excited to talk to him. I can't wait to hear what he has to say about a lot of different topics. Thank you so much, Duty. Very excited. I can't wait actually for Duty for you to come on. Everybody's so busy this summer, so I especially thank you, Jonti, for making time for me. I know I've had a crazy summer myself, so he's actually on, so I'm going to go ahead and invite him in, just so everybody knows, in case the internet cuts out. I'm just going to hop right back on, and we'll continue as if nothing ever happened. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and add him in. And can't wait to hear what Jonti has to say. And thank you again to everybody for tuning in. I appreciate it so much. We have like these lives and I'm basically in so many people's DMs and all this stuff. So I appreciate it. This is a community effort. And without, people to talk to, this really wouldn't work. So thank you for the likes and the hearts and the interaction. We're waiting for Jonti, I believe, maybe having some internet connection issues, which is fine. I always say that this is such a blessing. Other than that, I hope everybody's having like a great summer. I saw yesterday that New Jersey is having their Adiga Day next month. I think it was August 27th. So awesome. I mean, it's been a long time since I've been to one of those. I have such FOMO. I'm like dying to go. But even if I can't make it, which hopefully some miracle I'll be able to go, I can't wait to see I can't wait to see what everybody has in store. Invite. Let's see what we can do here. Accept. Okay. There you are. All right.
Sorry about that.
How are you?
Not bad, not bad. I didn't realize that I had Instagram didn't have my access to my video camera and microphone, so I had to fix that. Sorry about it.
It's totally fine. You should see the little things that pop up. You're just kind of like, wow, I had no idea that was even a thing.
And I was going to use a microphone too, but then when I connect the microphone, it also wants me to have a headphone on. I'm like, you know what? I don't feel like using headphones.
Yeah.
So sorry about the so good. Yeah.
No. It's totally fine. It's totally fine. Thank you, Jonti, for coming on. I'm a fan of your page. For anybody who doesn't know, I've linked his page to the previous post. Letting everybody know that you'd be on. I'm gonna link it here. I always enjoy reading your musings and your kind of thoughts. So I'm expecting like a really interesting, no
pressure.
no pressure, but no, it's always nice to see what people have to say and think, and especially just kind of reading a little bit from the kind of questions that I sent. So much to talk about, so many interesting things, but I'm gonna go ahead and pass the mic to you, Jonti. Introduce yourself. Tell us about your expertise, a little bit about your history, family history, whatever kind of just comes to mind. Just the autobiography of Jonti right now.
just the autobiography. Sure, no problem.
Right.
Yeah, this I'll have to practice a little bit. I'm not very good at it. I mean, I was born and raised in upstate New York. I would make regular trips to visit my family in New Jersey, the center of Caucasian culture in America.
Right.
So those were always fun trips. Went to school, college at Cornell, went to med school, decided, this is not for me. I really hate it.
Wow.
And so I know that was that was that's a whole story in itself.
I
Went into clinical research because that kind of made sense. Really didn't like that either.
Wow.
And then my wife and I, we started our own businesses together. That was fun. And kind of over the years, I've kind of like drifted towards entrepreneurship and, you know, had fun doing that. And now this is really my passion, really, like, you know, thinking about life and, you know, like whatever experience I've gone through, it's really been that growth aspect that's really gotten me excited, you know. In entrepreneurship, that's really what I loved. It was this, in order to become an entrepreneur, you really have to grow as a person. It's always yourself that's limiting. And so that's, and so I actually did this interesting exercise called an Ikigai exercise, in which you try to figure out, okay, what are you good at? What do you enjoy? What does the world need? And I kind of came up with this idea that, you know what I really like is this idea of self-improvement, self-discovery. And, you know, as Circassians, we've been through, like, you talk about many traumatic events. You know, our people are spread throughout the world. And, you know, as traumatizing, as problematic as that is, it's actually taught us things, right?
Right.
And we can take the good out of those experiences. We can take the bad out of those experiences. What I try to do is like really learn from them and learn from other people, you know. You know, I've had interesting friends from around the world. My wife is from Hong Kong. My roommate in college was from, you know, Korea. And I've learned a lot from all these different people and, you know, been connected to them. You know, even my rural upstate New York upbringing really contributed to who I am as a person. And so now I'm trying to bring everything together. It's like, look, you know, as a society, we're becoming very fragmented, very divided. It's becoming very tense. And so I'm like, okay, well, you know, what can I take from this, everything I've learned, to kind of help us heal, you know, divide, you know, bridge those divisions and break down those walls. And I think even within our own culture, there's a lot to be learned. And so, yeah, that's what I'm up to.
Do you guys see what I'm saying?
I
It's just like, I love it. And I want to say also, I just want to like put this out there. The fact that you're male and you're openly discussing so many things means so much to me personally, because I have, I don't know, I mentioned this, you know, I have 2 young boys, and my husband's amazing in that way. You know, he's a family guy and you know, very open personality. And I just feel like in our communities in general, immigrant communities, Caucasian communities, et cetera, we really need men to come and speak about a lot of these topics, just for like a rainbow of reasons. I just, you know, it's a very, you know, touching subject for me specifically. So, and I think that a lot of moms, especially in our generation, could agree that having just like men who are like from your culture, just open, talking, it's so important. So I really appreciate like all of the work you call them ramblings, musings, all this stuff. I mean, it is real work. It's serious work. So I appreciate that.
Thank you. Thank you.
Okay, so as an adult, what are some ways that you're connecting with your lineage, and like maybe in the past, and maybe how are you connecting with it now as an adult?
How am I connecting? It's difficult. I mean, you have the typical things, right? Food, right? Food is a big thing, right? You know, passing on that to the kids, showing them what are our traditional foods. You know, the dancing, the culture, things like that, you know, I share with them. You know, my father visited the Caucasians a few years ago, and he brought back the hat and the dress, and, you know, we shared that with the kids. And so those are ways, some very, you know, kind of simple ways we kind of pass on the culture, right? You know, I have to admit, you know, I grew up away from the Circassian community, right? So I don't have that to pull on. I have readings, I have family experiences, I have all those sorts of kind of things that I can pull on and pass on. And so I do that, right? You know, and the funny thing is, only now am I realizing that, like, actually, throughout my life, I've always had to tease apart what is culture, what is religion, where are these things coming from? And it's always a challenge because there's a lot of times there's many layers, right? So there's the faith that says this, but our culture also says this, but American society says this. So why do we do it? Well, because of all these reasons, right? And so, but I do see, like, within any community, there's always this emphasis of certain aspects of the faith because it's consistent with the culture, right? And so definitely this idea of honor, integrity, this is very important for Circassians, and it's something I emphasize a lot with my own children, right? Be a person who does what's right because it's right. Be honest, be upright, defend the weak, all those good things that our culture teaches us, that our faith teach us, I definitely try to pass on. But it's difficult. I think, in order for culture, like, I am more American than I am anything else, right? And I think that's true for all of us. Even my father grew up in the Middle East. He's very Arab and Syrian as a result of that experience. And so I think for culture to be propagated, there needs to be a critical mass of people that are interacting, that exhibit this behavior, not just telling people, but actually manifesting that behavior in their daily lives,
Right.
in order for kids to pick it up, right? It's one thing for me to tell my kids this, but unless I demonstrate that behavior, they're not going to pick it up.
Right.
They're going to, and in many ways, I think a lot of our values get lost that way because in many ways, immigrants are very pragmatic. It's like, yeah, we have these values, but right? And realism, and unfortunately, has become our culture, right? Pragmatism has become our culture just for the sake of survival. And I think if we want to talk about some of the values we have, we need to have forums like this. We need to have communities online. And that's one of the blessings, too, of the internet. One of the blessings, too, of COVID is that we're getting used to interacting online and having these communities online. And that's a place where this culture can be propagated and grow.
Right. Beautiful. I think also when you touched on, kind of the blessings of this internet world that we're living in, especially after COVID, I don't know if you noticed it, but people are trying to be more authentic in their presence online, which is so nice. Not to go on a tangent, but before it was like influencer world and it was very like flashy and everyone was just kind of like keeping up with the Joneses or something. And I really, really appreciate these days the way that we're all just kind of like real. Like, we're tired and we're just like keeping it real on the internet, and I appreciate that. And so much good has come from that. People are more comfortable to share their thoughts. Beautiful. So let's see. I mean, when I was talking to you before our conversation, you mentioned that you enjoyed talking about how your experience, I'm reading off of your thing, has helped, as a Circassian, has helped you see the world from different perspectives. And it's given you a model to move forward together as a nation, which just like, wow, like, I love that. If there's anything I would love to just hear in general what your ideas are regarding that.
Happy to share it.
This page is pretty much all about. So
I mean, this is one of the strengths of our culture, and I actually, growing up, I didn't see it as a strength. I actually didn't like it. Because I mean, growing up, I had to choose my own identity. I had to pave that path for myself, right? Am I an American? Am I a Muslim? Am I a Circassian? Am I, right? Am I Syrian? Am I like Russian? What am I, right?
Right.
And, for me, those, like, faith was really the most important thing for me in my early days, and still today. My faith is very important to me. And growing up around, like, in the Indian and Pakistani community in upstate New York, that was my model. And I was very impressed with how religious they are, right? It's like, wow, they pray together, they do this, they do that. And then, as you grow up and my Indian and Pakistani friends, I get to know them more personally, I get to know more people. And you see that, well, a lot of people aren't really religious. just, it's an outward manifestation that really isn't in their hearts. And so what I saw is like there's a lot of hypocrisy that's been bred because everybody's forced to act a certain way, right? Forced to act as if they are religious. And I realized that, wow, you know, so this thing that I saw within our own community, this freedom to be religious, secular, whatever you want to be, what I saw was as a liability was actually a really incredible asset. I was given this freedom to be religious because that's what I chose, because that's what I like. That's where my heart took me. And like a lot of my friends are going through crises of faith, right? Like through a crisis of faith because they were never given that choice, right? Never given that option. And in America now I'm seeing that like we have a similar problem, which is there are different ideologies. The right, you know, the conservative party is painting a certain picture of what America should be. The liberals are painting a picture of what America should be. And it's basically love it or leave it, right? Either you're with us or against us. And each side is hardening the will of the other side. And we're going towards a really bad confrontation. And I'm like, you know, is there another way? And looking at our own culture, I'm like, well, we're all very stubborn people who have our own ideas on how we should live life, but we get along. We get along because we have another identity, another set of concerns that we share. And so, okay, those we will work on together, and our own personal lives are our own personal lives. We don't try to impose it on others. We're free. You don't want to pray? Go pray. You want to go drink? Go drink.
Right.
Your choice.
So true. Go do both, whatever.
Or do both. Whatever you want. That's your life, you know? So nobody's concerned to force you to do one or the other, right? And so I think there's something really admirable about that I didn't really, I think, like fully appreciate as a younger person, you know, struggling with my own faith. But now as an adult who I'm you know, confident in my own faith, and I like having that flexibility. I like having that freedom. And I think, you know, as a society, America could learn a lot from us and how to have very strongly held beliefs personally, but find a way to exist together and work on common causes together.
Wow. I love that. Wow. That's never crossed my mind. I've never even heard that in a conversation. That's literally like a first time for me. And it makes complete sense, because when you have something bigger uniting a group, like cultural identity, for example, I mean, you know, a lot of Circassians will say that no matter where they go in the world, if they ever meet Circassian people, they instantly feel a kinship towards them without knowing, you know, are they secular? Are they atheist? Are they Muslim? Are they Christian? You know, it's just like, oh my God, like you're Circassian, like cool, my brother, my sister, like it's a very warm kind of a reception. So, and it's just to add to that, you know, I recently moved to Texas. And before that, I was living in California, and me and you, we come from like the same hood in Southern California. Of course, I grew up in New Jersey. I don't want to make any of my people out there upset, but, you know, I've adapted to that California mindset. And, you know, in Texas right now, a lot of Texans are saying, you know, like they want Texas to stay very Texas. You know, a lot of like Californians and New Yorkers are coming down here, and they're just like, don't come down here. Yeah, just don't. And, you know, in my mind, I'm like, you know, as Americans, like it's our country, and it's one thing to be xenophobic to foreigners, which we've seen, we know that, but to be that way about your own countrymen, it kind of blows me away, you know, because when I lived in Turkey, I don't think you'd ever see that in Turkey, where people are like, oh, you came from Istanbul, now you're living in Bursa. Like people would be like, oh, don't.
Yeah.
You know,
it's fascinating. I mean, even in, like, I grew up in rural upstate New York. Like we did not have a very friendly relationship with New Yorkers, like New York City people, right? It's like, you know, we don't like them, they don't like us, you know, each wants to get rid of the other. There is that in the United States, right? There are
Turf. It's like
there's
turf wars or something.
even cultural, like really, like I think I feel that, like growing up in upstate New York, you say hi to everybody. It doesn't matter. Even like when my wife and I moved back to upstate New York a few years back, you know, we'd be walking on a dirt road, you know, just getting our exercise in, and she's wearing a headscarf. She's Chinese, and you know, somebody passes by, you say hi, you wave your hand, you say hi. You know, it doesn't matter. They might hate you. They might like, yeah, these Muslims need to leave this country. But I'm gonna be like, kind and you know, hospitable, right? That's kind of the culture of rural upstate New York. Whereas in New York City, you don't look at another person. Like, don't look at me. You look at me, you're gonna start a fight. You know, it's like, what's your problem? What do you want from me, right?
Right.
There's a very different culture, right? I mean, and that's true for Texas as well, right? They have a very different culture than California and then New York. And so, yeah, there are those tensions, but as long as, you know, like we're talking about, like live and let live, right? You know, you can be California, but just understand, respect our culture as well, right? You know, you came to our turf, respect that culture. And I think we need more of that, you know, more respect for these differences and more understanding. Whether, you know, just like we were talking about within the Circassian community, you know, we don't, it doesn't matter, you're secular, you're religious, we are Circassian, and we, you know, it's easy for us on a certain level because we are an endangered group, really. We're being wiped off the face of the earth as we speak. So, with America, it's a large country. So they don't have that kind of existential crisis to motivate them.
Right. It's not urgent.
It's not. And that's what's scary. And I do worry something really horrible has to happen before people realize this need to come together and bridge our differences. But on the other side, there's hope, because this country is very different than most in the sense that it's founded on values. Right. And so someone like you, someone like me, our parents, they can come to this country and we can feel at home. We can feel like an American, right? There's no difference, right? Whereas if we went to, let's say, even a European country, which might be democratic, which might be open, right, and accept immigrants, at the same time, I'll never be French. I'll never be, you know, Dutch, because that's just not my heritage. I might live there, I might have a citizenship, but I'm never going to be one of them.
Right.
Whereas in America, we can't. So I think there's something there. But anyway, I'm going off on a tangent now as well. So
it's important.
Bring it back to the Circassians.
but this is the world that we live in. I mean, this is a layer of our culture, you know, and if we were going to take it even further, you know, that's a layer of our like identity. And personally, I think that this, you know, that when we were growing up, it's like, oh, America's a melting pot, and then you're like, no, it's not a melting pot, it's a salad, and it's like all this soup, and it's like all these things. But at the end of the day, what ends up happening is that you do blend in if you're able to. And I feel like because of our like racial, where we fit in racially, we do fit into a certain
we can integrate much easier.
Yes.
Yeah, it's easier for us to integrate, for sure, 100%. I mean, that's why, I mean, I could live in rural upstate New York and be okay. Whereas my other friends who are Indian or Pakistani grew up in rural Pennsylvania, they did not have a similar experience, right? And we'll have arguments about this back and forth. And like, look, you know, you have a legitimate experience. I know, but I have an experience too, right? And we're fortunate. That's one of the blessings we have. We have many tragedies in our history, but this is one of the blessings. And I think there's something else that I think Circassian culture is, I don't know if this is how this is connected, but we tend to serve the nation, have a loyalty to the nation that we're a part of.
Right. Big time.
Big time, you know? Typically, it's usually in kind of the military, armed forces kind of sense, right? But I feel like that sense of loyalty actually goes beyond that. And I think, you know, sharing our lessons and trying to be a benefit to this nation, you know, is part of our culture as well. You know, we've been given a haven, right? I mean, that most other nations haven't given us. I mean, we were kicked out of one nation, then kicked out of
Right.
another nation, and then, right? I mean, through wars, through,
Just
intolerance, all sorts of
just
things.
being shuffled around, basically, in the Ottoman Empire time, literally just being shuffled around like pieces on a board. So just, okay, this group is gonna go here, this group's gonna go here, we blah blah blah, and yeah, and I think that being in America has definitely offered us a level of comfort and security that we were not able to obtain in other parts of the world, like the Middle East. But what I admire so much is what people were able to do, what they're still able to do in those areas.
Yeah.
But the way they've adapted, the way they've held on and carried on, it does look different from the American way, especially as the generations progress and we have more like born and raised in America, not just like,
Immigrant,
like our parents' generation and stuff. So it is all so fascinating. It's so fascinating when you hear about like these insulated communities. Like I remember my father saying that there was like a lot of Circassians in Iraq that like nobody knew about, and in Libya, and just like all over in these random places. And
I know. I've heard even some people say in Iran there were communities. Yeah, Iraq I heard, right?
Yeah.
Fascinating. Yeah. In Eastern Europe there used to be many communities, right?
Right.
Yeah.
Very cool. Very cool. I wanted to ask you, because I have my questions here. Do you have any hopes for the future of the community or the Caucasus in general?
Hope. Yeah, it depends on the day you asked me. If I'm going to be completely honest, if I'm feeling really pessimistic that day, maybe it's hard to say. I think with any certainty, it's hard to say. There's always hope. I think we have to adapt. I think, unfortunately, we look back a lot. I don't think that's a sign of a very healthy culture when we look back. And we're seeing that happening in America right now. People are starting to look back, all the way things were, rather than the future. That's a very dangerous sign. It means your best days are behind you. And if we can focus our attention back on the future, be inspired by the past, but make plans for the future, I think then my optimism will go up. If all we do is like look back to the past, then I have concerns. So it really depends on how we react. I'm impressed with the activity of Circassians on social media, this, reaffirming our identity. And I think conversations like this that you're having will also be a place where we can talk about where do we want to go as a people, what are we going to pull on? Because cultures change, right? And I remember growing up, my father telling me we have to preserve the culture. I'm like, cultures change, cultures evolve. American culture now versus 50 years ago is dramatically different. And this is true for any healthy culture. It evolves and changes. It takes what it learns from other cultures. It takes what it learns from technology and it evolves. And so we just have to figure out what way are we going to evolve, staying consistent with our values, pulling on that history and that culture, but having a trajectory, having a goal in mind. I think if as a community, we can kind of paint a picture of the future we want to create, I think that would go a long ways to help us preserve identity and move forward together, right? Is it this idea of going back to the Caucasus? Are we going to develop the economic infrastructure within our homeland so that those people can do well, provide opportunities, and then it becomes a more attractive destination for us to go to? Maybe even live there for a while, maybe even move there permanently, maybe retire. I don't know. But unless we have a plan for what our future looks like, and we're just relying on just kind of random chance, things tend towards entropy, right? They just tend towards disorder. And the only way we're going to have a better future is if we plan for that. And so, things like, certification language programs, great scholarship program to make sure that we were educated and we're on the cutting edge of knowledge and technology. I think that's going to be important. I think economic development, business. I think, Circassian community, as far as I know, my experience, we're not really big into business and entrepreneurship and that stuff. I think we need to get into there. I mean, those people who have that knack, they need to do that, find ways. It'd be great if we could have like a venture fund that funds even like on a small scale, small businesses back in the Caucasus, helps them grow into bigger businesses, gives them economic empowerment. We're having a lot of refugees. I have a lot of family who like fled into the Middle East and now they're fleeing back into the Caucasus. And you hear the stories, the opportunities there aren't very many, right? And if we want our community to thrive, not just like survive, but to thrive, we need to create those opportunities. But it's also founded on trust, right? We have issues with trust. We have issues with trustworthiness, which shouldn't be, given our cultural heritage, given our religious heritage. We should not have this issue. But again, so there's this issue of self-improvement, right? Of reviving the culture, and not just in words, but in actions. If we talk about having honor and being trustworthy people, then we need to manifest that. And it starts with parents, raising their kids to, and that's another fortunate thing. When you live in a prosperous country, you can do that, right? Because you don't have to worry about surviving. Unfortunately, far too often people give up their morals when they have to eat, right? And so if we can give people food, then they can afford to have their values, right? So I think economic development is a big part of our future.
So I want to ask you, because I always play around with this in my own mind. Globally, as Caucasians are concerned, are we looking to the Caucasian, the ones actually living in the Caucasus, are we looking to them for cues as to which direction and how we should be, moving our efforts? Or is it more of a subset? Should the Americans focus on the Americans? Should the Middle Easterners focus on themselves? Kind of where does this effort go? How does it go? In my mind, because, people who are not up on religion and stuff, just excuse this. This is the best example, I can give. But, in Islam, we say there's an ummah, and then you have the head of the ummah, which our ummah has not had in a long time, hence very fractured sort of society for a while now. So it's basically, where is the head of the Circassian / Caucasian movement towards the future, towards betterment? Kind of where are we getting our cues from?
Interesting. I honestly hadn't given it a thought, but now that you mention it, I do have some thoughts. I always seem to have thoughts. My apologies. So if we do stay in this kind of isolated, American Circassians, Middle Eastern Circassians, Caucasian Circassians, right? If that's the route we go, then the community will just become more fragmented, right? It will bifurcate, trifurcate, whatever you want to call it, right? It's gonna go in multiple different directions, and you're gonna have multiple different communities. If you want to maintain a cohesive Circassian culture, I think we need to each pull from the cultures we're born into, right? Okay. So from America, we have the American expertise and cultural knowledge and experience that we can contribute to the Circassian Ummah, right? The Middle East, they can share their knowledge and experience and understanding of the world. From Turkey, from all the Israel, from all the different areas that I think, but it needs to be negotiated. It needs to be discussed. It needs to be agreed upon. And I'm a big fan of the best idea should win, right? There should be a marketplace of ideas, and whatever makes sense. Even testing. I love entrepreneurship. So many lessons in entrepreneurship. Put an idea out there, test it, see if it works. I don't like this idea of, and we have this a lot in the third world, in our culture too. It's very top down. I think we need to democratize that process a little bit, because it creates a stagnant society. It's important. I think that elders need to be respected. I think, you know, there needs to be there needs to be respect given to those who have experience, right? Otherwise, things can move too quickly, too fast, and it can actually create destruction, right? It can destroy the very thing you're trying to create and build. But at the same time, if we really do pool our resources, and alhamdulillah, we have those, you know, it's like annual Circassian conferences, right? I think those are great places to come together, share ideas, you know, and then, you know, share what we've been working on, learn from each other, go back home, keep working, but always staying in touch, always kind of pulling on the expertise of this diverse community we have. And it's not many communities have that. Many communities are very stagnant because they can only pull from one culture, one historical, right? But we pull from a lot. And it admittedly will change the culture more than if you didn't, but it'll also strengthen the culture more than if we didn't. That's my opinion. I mean, you know, I'm not going to step on anybody's toes here. I don't know this conversation. I apologize if I offended somebody, but just from a purely just logic, rational way of approaching this, I think that would be a very reasonable way to do it.
I mean, it's as good as an answer as any. And for me, my thing is I like to hear what everybody has to say, obviously. That's my thing. So
a good approach.
Yeah. I mean, staying open, staying kind of humble, seeing what people have to say, speaking on their experiences. I mean, I've had now my another entrepreneur on here, the same type of logic, the same type of approach, you know, open, experimental, you know, inquisitiveness. Like it's a beautiful trait to have. And I think you touched on a lot of really interesting cultural points there, especially about top down. A few of my guests have mentioned that, you know, they grew up feeling very stifled because of that. And I'm also not saying to get rid of like the elders and the tamadas and all of that either, but just a little bit more of a level playing field because, you know, I mean, for me, my personal wish, I think that when we talk about, you know, our people discussing things, there needs to be a understanding among everybody. And I think a lot of that needs to be very open and honest about how, basically what I'm trying to find the best way to say it, but basically about how you were saying, you know, like, you know, that it may be a checks and balances, like the older generation could check the younger generation could bring up more, you know, kind of invigorating ideas for the community, and it's all fair and it's all good. And then it's just like a voting system or something like that.
I think there's just honor system. Like that's the beautiful thing about experimentation. Let's say somebody has an idea on, you know, like Jonti Misha is working on the Circassian language. That's a really big action project for him. Right. So, you know, nobody's going to say, no, that's not the right way to do it. No, yeah, go do it. Go, God bless, right? If we can help, let us know, right? Everybody can work on their own little project, right? And of course, take the wisdom of the elders. You know, if they have concerns, consider it, right? Right. That's just another expertise you're pulling on, right? You know, if you're building a language platform, well, you want to talk to linguists. You know, want to pull on their expertise. You want to talk to technology people. How can I implement? Marketing people, but also the elders of the community. What do they see that we don't see because we of age, lack of cultural understanding, there's so many weaknesses that each one of us have. But when we come together, we build, it's a groupthink. We actually cancel out each other's weaknesses and create an even stronger symbiotic kind of intelligence that can do more than any one of us can do individually. So I think ego is something that we have to watch out for. I think in any organization, we have to watch out for egos in ourselves. And, you know, like you're saying, curiosity. Just follow our curiosity and look out for the good of the group. right? We all want the same goal. We want to see our culture thriving and not just surviving, but thriving.
Right.
If we can do that, nothing can stop us.
Right. There is this whole element of generational sort of trauma, and then alongside of that, generational blessings and gifts that we've gotten over time. Um, and I think that, I mean, my personal wish, and I'm in contact. I've had maybe two so far guests who are in therapy, and then one, hopefully she'll be on. She's a therapist as well, and you know, I really hope that part of our cultural, I think it's necessary moving forward, is discerning the difference between what is culture and what is like generational trauma. And I think a lot of that, because I know that there are a lot of people, and you sort of touched on it in your answers to the questions about dysfunction in the community and certain dramas that may arise, and then just like an apprehension to really be a part of the community. And I personally, I feel like people who are extremely involved in community issues are so brave. And I feel like I don't want that. I don't want to be like, they're so brave because they're on the board, or they're trying to start a program and they're working with our people, you know, because once you kind of let people in, and it's like there's a lot of FaceTime and ideas and stuff, the egos start to come out, people get hurt, feelings get hurt, and it's very counterproductive. And all of that is trauma. That's all trauma, you know, feeling like, you know, like you can't just be yourself and enter the group that you belong to, and just kind of flow and vibe. And it's unfortunate, I know it exists, but a lot of people are able to override it for the love of culture. They can kind of like move past that, and then for a lot of people, they're like, nope, no thanks. They're just like, I'm done here.
It's a shame. I see this in the Caucasian community. I also see it in the broader Muslim community, right? I think, you know, for the Muslims, the biggest obstacle for the young generation to fully embrace Islam are Muslims. Like the immigrant generation, we love to blame all the Western culture and this, that. No, in the Western, I grew up, like, I used to go to parties with my friends. They're drinking, you know, getting like, you know, like can't even walk. And I'm like, they're not drinking. That's my choice. That's the life I chose for myself. And I never felt pressured to do that. Right. But within our community, we push people away. We use our faith as a weapon to say that I am better and you are lower. I am superior, you are inferior. Right. And it's self-destructive. And you're right, I've seen it in our community as well, and it's self-destructive. If we truly care about our Circassian community, then we need to embrace each other rather than trying to reinforce this hierarchy. I understand it's part of our culture. I understand it's part of our history. But it is not something that it's one of those things that I think is just going to have to go by the wayside. Like, we can respect it, we can look back at it, maybe take certain aspects from it. But I think in a global world like the one we live in, I think it drives people away. Because if I can live in a society that accepts me the way I am, that makes me feel warm and welcome, well, I'm going to go to that. I'm not going to go to the place that's harsh and cruel and mean and puts me down, right? That's one of the blessings of America, but that's also one of the things that's destroying our culture, because you don't feel comfortable with judgy people looking down at you. You don't want to be there. So if we do, that's one of the most important things I think moving forward too, is like, if we really do value our culture and we want to see it thrive, then we need to love each other. We need to support each other. We need to encourage each other. That has to be part of the culture. And I don't know how else to say that, right? I mean, I don't know our culture that well, but I can't believe that we don't have that. When ancestors stood there on the battlefield fighting the Russians, men and women together to preserve their families and their lives. Like, I can't believe that was done out of anything other than love for each other and their people, right? So we have that in us. We have that love. We're even willing to sacrifice ourselves, like as parents, just so our children hopefully can survive and move on, right? I mean, there is that love. And I think we need to remember it. And I think we need to talk about it. And I think we need to embrace it and act on it in our community. I try to do it in like my own small little, circle with the people around me. And I think if we all do that, that becomes culture, right? Culture isn't, okay, you know what? We need to love each other and stop doing this. Just manifest it. That is what culture is. If we manifest, if we like this idea and we manifest it in our life, well, that becomes our culture. Right. And I think we need to remember that as well. It's not like a judgy, pushy thing. It's just lead by example.
Right. Beautifully said. I appreciate that a lot. Thank you for getting into that. I mean, after becoming a parent myself, which, there are a lot of parents walking around. You don't get an award for becoming a mom or a dad, but if you allow it to, it can really set you on a spiritual journey. And becoming a parent, as somebody who grew up very attached to my culture, enough life experiences, I became sort of jaded or disillusioned for a minute, and I almost lost my
crisis of culture.
Yeah, I almost lost my internal like drive for it. I almost lost it. Just like, what's the point, But then having children kind of like reignited all of that for me again. And like you said, it's all for love. If it's not love, you can tell right away if it's not from love. And I love the way you tied that into our ancestors who were fighting. I think that, I know a lot of people, they go to that imagery of our ancestors and a lot of different interpretations of that time in our history. But the strongest is the one of just love. And I don't know, popular culture, ancient culture, indigenous culture, all of it, wherever you go on this planet, that's just a consistent theme. It's just so strong, just overrides so much. So I appreciate your take on that. Mike Liberty, love saves the day. It sure does, Mike.
Thanks,
sure
Mike.
does. All right. So I wanted to ask, because you gave me like a really great answer on paper. So I wanted to kind of like just get your opinion about this kind of for everybody. And I have not had, I think you'd be the first person to talk about this. So I wrote this question about social anxiety before entering a cultural setting, right? So because in my family, we're 3 sisters, and each of us handles cultural settings differently. And one of us has a lot of anxiety about it. And it was just, I couldn't understand it. And then I'm like looking around, I'm like, man, a lot of people have this. So as time goes on, you just meet people. So the question is, do you ever get social anxiety before entering a cultural setting? Have you ever explored why this happens to you, and how do you manage it? And that this information would be basically helpful to anybody who might have that problem.
Yeah, I mean, like I said, I didn't grow up with the Circassians, right? I grew up in upstate New York. And so I only started, I went to visit family throughout my life, right? But I only probably started going to the CASA, the CBA. It was a teenager. And then my father like just dumped us there. And like, oh, meet some people. Like, do you know I'm shy? I don't talk to strangers. And like, what are you doing, right? That didn't help. That really did not help. And please don't do that to your kids if you're ever put in that situation, especially if they're shy and like, maybe more of an introvert like me. So, advice number 1. So yeah, there was a lot of, because you always want to know what are the rules, right? What are the rules of interacting, right? And it took me a while to figure that out. And people are sometimes only too happy to show you how you're screwing it up, right? And that definitely doesn't alleviate the social anxiety. So be kind to each other, leave our egos at the door. I think that's a very important lesson for all of us. If we really want our community to thrive, we have to respect and love each other, and rather than, like you said, using our culture as an excuse for making somebody feel less than. I see this in a lot of our communities, and like I said, it's not limited to the Circassian community, but there's always this hierarchy. My wife's a convert, right? She's made to feel inferior by certain ethnic groups. I won't go into them, but they're like, oh, how long have you been Muslim? Did you become Muslim because of your husband, right? It's like, what do you mean? It's like, I feel like if they were to interact with the Prophet, like, oh, you're the first generation to be Muslim? Oh, my family's been Muslim for many generations. It's like, your logic, like,
doesn't work.
It has nothing to do with faith. It has everything to do with your ego, your own insecurities. And I think, so what do I recommend? I've gotten better at this with age, just because you become more comfortable in your skin. You know who you are, you know what your values are, and you don't, people can say whatever. It doesn't bother you after a while. But I can't remember, like, I actually gave you a formula. Not a formula, but I gave you like 3 points.
You did. I love it. That's why I'm like, so step
one. And I'm going to totally disappoint you by forgetting what they were.
No. I got you. I'm here. Step 1, don't worry.
Don't worry.
Don't worry about being judged, basically.
Yes. Yeah, I think that's very important. I think, like, if you truly do care about our community and, you want to see it better, you're going to deal with judgmental people. That's just part of being the human family. Whatever group you're in, there's going to be judgmental people, right? People, that's just dealing with people. So don't worry. There's a higher purpose here. There's a higher cause. And a lot of times those people who are being very vicious, they themselves are insecure. And that's what I've learned in my life. The biggest bullies are the people who have been bullied the most. They feel the most insecure, and this is their way of dealing with it. So again, don't worry. And then I was like, don't worry, be curious.
Yes.
Right? Be curious. I remember that. So I think that's good for any social, situation, right? I'm always the happiest one. I'm always trying to learn. Like, you would think that in my own cultural setting, I'd be the most comfortable, but that's been where maybe I have to learn the most. And it's okay to be curious and learn, and that's okay. And if people kind of like make fun of you and look down at you, that's okay. Don't worry. Go back to rule number 1. Don't worry. But being curious, you're going to learn a lot, and you're going to grow, and that's just going to make you a better person. And that's whether you're in your own cultural situation, like, trying to kind of get into the Circassian community and be one of them, or it's going into a community that you don't know. Just be curious and learn. You stumble, you make mistakes. Good people are going to understand. They're not going to judge you. They're going to help you. And those are the kind of people you want to be with. So, being curious is going to get you really far. So don't worry, be curious. And the last one, what was the last one?
Know yourself.
Know yourself. Yeah, that's sort of like, be confident, right? And yeah, it's hard when you're young, when you're starting off in life. I understand, like, you're a teenager. Know yourself is a little harder. As you become 20s, 30s, 40s, you really start to develop a sense of who you are and what your values are. And if you know who you are, your skin just naturally gets thicker. What people say doesn't hurt you. Sometimes because you understand that comes from their own insecurity. Because, well, that's a conclusion you've come to. That's okay for you, but that's not the conclusion I've come to. And I think also that's where be curious comes. If somebody does disagree with you, explain to me. Why do you think like that? Can you explain it to me? Right? And just
disarm them with that curiosity, right?
It works.
Completely disarm them. Yeah.
It really works. I mean, as long and I think that also this is a real opportunity for us as and the younger generation to get rid of that ego, right? I think if we can get rid of our egos, you know, this may not be a very popular idea, but I really believe that one of the reasons this is coming to from my spiritual religious half, it's like God puts us through experiences for a reason. And I feel like we have a really big ego as a community. And I think if we could just kind of temper that, control it a little bit, maybe replace it with some curiosity, some love, I think I would have a lot more optimism in our future. I think, you know, God tests those he loves, right? And, you know, I'm going to take this difficult situation. I'm going to take this, you know, generation after generation getting their butts handed to them as God's love and learn my lesson, right? And try to move on. And I just encourage others. Like, I think we have to look at ourselves. When life is difficult, that's an opportunity for us to grow. So what am I doing wrong? You know? And I think if we can do that, if we just get rid of the egos, I think we'd be so much better off. I mean, I love my people, I have my community, and it's not always a bad thing. Like, you know, this idea of honor and dignity is a very good thing. If it helps you to do the right thing, if your personal, your view of yourself is connected to your goodness, the good you put out into the world, the honor and dignity you have. And honor and dignity isn't intimidation. Honor and dignity, it's earning the respect of others because you are somebody who does the right thing. If you find $1,000 on the ground, you pick it up and you find out who it belongs to. That's honor. That's dignity, because it earns people's respect. It's not something you demand from people. It's something it's earned. And I think we need to kind of change how we understand that concept.
To piggyback that, there is also something that I've seen, I've experienced, I've heard, and if I've experienced it or heard it or whatever, I'm not unique. I subscribe to that. If I'm going through it, I'm gonna find a whole slew of people that have gone through it. And you know, when because we have the Caucasian Day coming up at the association in New Jersey, so that's why I'm kind of I wanted you to talk about this a little bit, because you said you didn't grow up around Circassian people. And you know, if one person who's going, a young person who's going to that event that doesn't live in New Jersey and is nervous about going, hears this, it will have been completely worth it. You know,
I didn't discourage them.
No, but there's something about my page that I'm trying to also communicate as gentle as possible, which is, for lack of a better term, like a kind of a cultural bullying that happens, which is, you know, that how you were basically describing, you know, like, how Circassian are you on paper? And if you don't check off enough boxes, then guess what? I guess I'm better than you in that regard. I'm more Circassian, I'm more whatever. And you end up losing a lot of really great people that way. Yeah. And my last guest, Tamir, who's also from California, from Southern California, and he's a community, one of the prominent community figures that we have down there for his age, which is just remarkable.
Nice.
You know, he said we can't afford to lose people. We can't afford to just, you know, drive people out because I don't agree with your lifestyle, or I don't agree with your religious views, or whatever. You know, as a group, we need each other. We need that community. The glue of our community is acceptance. It's openness. It's welcome, you know. And in my own personal opinion, this is mine and mine alone, that includes people who are of, you know, I hate like this percentages thing that we have.
Half-bloods.
Half-bloods, right?
Mudbloods.
My parents are both Circassian, but I'm I'm a human on this earth. I know a lot of the half, half Circassian, half something else.
Yeah.
And, as a mom now, again, it just like bothers me that that's a thing.
Yeah.
When you look at other indigenous cultures, like the Native American culture, like, the African American, the descendants of slaves, like, I mean, go all over the world. I'm sure there are a lot of groups that do what we do as well, but the ones that are really thriving and are really experiencing like a cultural renaissance are the ones that are like, just come, join our circle. We'll talk details later. It's open,
It comes from you touched on it, right? Which is the generational trauma. I never
Right.
thought of it in those terms, but it actually makes a lot of sense.
Yeah.
And just like a victim of a bully then becomes a bully, right? Not always, but more often than not.
You learn how to bully,
and they propagate, right? And then, like you said,
right,
that becomes the culture.
right.
I I've also realized that you have to feel secure in your own skin, right? And we talked about that, right? Just America is facing the same problem, right? We're not feeling comfortable in our own skin. And so there's this kind of xenophobic backlash, right? We need to get rid of the impurities from society. And it destroys the very thing you're trying to preserve. And I don't know what it takes for people to understand that. I mean, we're split between how many countries our language is being wiped off the face of the earth. I don't speak it. I would love to, right? I think now there's an opportunity to reverse this, right? Using the internet, using all the resources we have, having a virtual global Circassian community is possible now. But if we have this, like you say, bullying, intolerant culture, then we're just going to drive people away. No amount of tools can overcome that. And I agree with you. It starts with us healing ourselves and feeling comfortable ourselves and being happy. I mean, we need like a psychotherapy on a community level, right? Somebody to come in and we're all blessed in so many ways, but there's this. And again, like I said, it's not limited to the Circassian community. I see this in the Arab and Indian Pakistani community.
Yes.
That people get pit against one another. It's this idea of the crabs in the barrel, right? Pulling each other. They see somebody going up. Oh no, you can't go up before I go up, right? And then they're all stuck in the barrel. So yeah, we'll always all be losers if that's going to be our attitude. And we will. And the Circassian identity will disappear from the face of the earth. That is the natural consequence of that attitude, that approach, versus lifting people up. And my good friend in college, my first roommate, good friend, he's Korean. There are so many similarities between our cultures, and also this sense of impending doom, right? They're threatened by Japan. They've been occupied by Japan and China. And so they know their existence is not a given, right? Right now they have a nation, even their nation now is divided in half, right? So, but what Koreans do differently is they're tough on each other, but they also lift each other up, right? They knew that they need to invest in business and industry. And so look, Samsung, Sanyo, Kia, Hyundai, like how many big brands are coming out of Korea and how many more we don't even know about. But it comes, it's kind of hand in hand, economic development, but you also need the psyche, the mentality of the people to change so that it's one of lifting each other out of the barrel rather than pulling each other back down into it, right? And unless we can learn that, unless we see hope for a better future, right? And that's another thing. I think painting a picture of a better future and working towards it and knowing that, okay, we're gonna lift each one of ourselves up. We're gonna lift ourselves out of this. But it starts with working with trustworthy people that can be trusted, that can do the right thing, that don't have the egos to just put themselves up on top and push everybody else down. but are willing to lift others up and out of the situation they're in. I think that's how we move forward. But we have to acknowledge that we've kind of developed that a dysfunctional way of interacting with one another. But keep this conversation going. I love it. And I think, there's a lot of potential. There's a lot of hope. And good people like you and others, right? I mean, Jonti introduced me to the brother in Israel there's a Circassian museum, right? Oh. He's sharing Circassian culture with Israelis. They come in, they enjoy Circassian food, they learn about the Circassian history. And I think that's another way of preserving culture as well. Like, again, how's the Korean community, made people proud of their culture and wanting to be Korean? It's letting the world see the beauty of it as well. K-pop, restaurants.
You did mention this in one of your questions. I guess I didn't highlight it, but I want to hear your thoughts on that, on preservation. You did touch on that about letting people know about us. Yeah. That's a great way to preserve your culture, is just exposure. Yep. We have a tendency that our exposure is mainly through dancing, especially in America. So this is very cool. Yep. I know, like in Turkey, because there's just so many of us, that just kind of everybody knows about Cherkez, but that's really cool that they have that. That's amazing.
It's soft power. The Korean government actually supported the opening of Korean restaurants around the world, because they knew that's a form of soft power, right? Wow. And what it does, it has twofold benefit, right? So others who don't know about Korean culture are introduced to it and enjoy the beauty of it, namely its food, right? And two, your own people feel a pride in their culture. They might want to learn the language. They might want to go home, right? And they preserve it and spread it, right? For us to get out of the situation we find ourselves in, one of the aspects is sharing our culture with others, right? Maybe even creating grants and foundations that will support maybe dance troupes being brought to America. And that, again, can become a business, right? The Chinese do this with their dance, Shen something, I forget.
Something yen, something like that.
Yep. Yes. Again, sharing their culture, right? We have a very proud tradition of dancing and our dress and our music. And so sharing that with others is also another way to share our culture. Having, maybe places to eat, restaurants, and maybe in America, food truck or something, Circassian food truck,
That's a cool idea.
Halava, wherever you go. I'm just thinking about myself. I want a halava, food truck here in SoCal.
It would do good. It would do right? good. Halava is just delicious. I feel like people who are listening to this might say that these things are possible for like Korean because they have a country. Yeah. And a major hurdle for our people, Caucasians in general, like Georgians, Armenians, Azeris, they are more prominent because they have their own culture, like our region, like Dagestan, Chechnya, Circassians and this and that. I don't know if you can hear my toddler, but he's having a day. he's screaming right outside.
I can't hear that loud. It's good.
Okay, good, because he's like flipping out. But they're able to kind of pump out cultural sort of elements. And a huge disadvantage for our people is that we do not have like a political border for that. But I want to say, as like a rebuttal, sort of, that this is true. But I want to argue that those of us who are living in the West, where we've integrated and for better or for worse assimilated in many ways, you cannot discount the literal wealth of resources that you have at your fingertips. Yep. And the weight of the American or even European, just anything that we do, it's just weighted more, which is unfair, but at the same time, it's just a fact of life. Living in Turkey, I really, really got to see that. It was mind-blowing.
Mm.
That's why I was saying the way that other countries, like our people in other countries, have been able to carry on is so inspiring, knowing that they just don't have like all of the incredible resources that we have here.
Yeah, I agree.
You know, it's just like
We can do it.
a
Yeah, you're right.
dollar.
I mean, we don't need a government, right? I mean, yes. I mean, if we did have a government, they might have the resources. They might not have the resources because
Right.
if the economy is not developed, it doesn't matter. They're not going to have a revenue base. And so I think that's something we can work on right now, right? Like I'm saying, like, I'm not necessarily the one to do this, but I know there are people within our community who aren't entrepreneurs, who might be VCs, who could think about creating a small fund to start investing in small businesses and see what those returns are. And that becomes this kind of little trust fund for cultural, other investments and other cultural soft power investments, right? Like, bringing dance troops, which again can become a business too. That will make money as well, right? As long as it can be produced well, etc. I think economic development is going to be really important if we want to survive as a community.
Right.
Because like you said, we don't have a government. So now it's on us. And asking, just working people to be donating more and more money doesn't make sense.
Right.
But if you can create business, if you can create, opportunities, then that can be your funding source.
Right.
And there are models that can be created to do this. You just need intelligent people to come together. And like you said, with the economic and cultural power of America, I think the opportunities can be as good as or even better than a poor third world country, which if it was an independent, it would be, right? So I think it's a lot of times we kind of resign ourselves, and it's a very unfortunate thing that I remember growing up with. It's like, there's a lot of lament and blaming. Oh, this group did this, or this group controls this. And like, what do? We don't have any control. We don't have any ability. We don't have any intelligence. I guess we do. So a lot of times we give ourselves an excuse not to do something, right? I don't buy that. I think there are, like I share your outlook, which is, look, we have a lot of assets at our fingertips. It just requires the will. There's enough people to come together with the right skill set to like I said, build up this kind of circation economy, and everything else flows from that. Once you do that, then people can get high-paying jobs. Once they have those, they also will spend money, and that creates other businesses, right? And then it's just this virtuous cycle. But it's hard in the beginning, right? It's very hard in the beginning. Yes, it would be great if we had a government, but without that, it's in some ways it's even better. Like a government will just be one entity, and we're always limited by their ability and their thoughts.
Right.
To be as decentralized and spread out as we are, every individual now becomes a potential government and a potential change maker, right?
Every family, right? We're
Every
like
family,
state.
But we have to cooperate. It can't just be one person, right? We do need to come together and work together. Right. If we can do that, sky's the limit. I can feel very optimistic. But that's yet to be seen. I'm counting on you to bring these pieces together. All right.
You know what? I'm trying to bring and uplift our voices as much as possible. And can you
hear voices?
Yeah, they're speaking of voices. I'm trying to bring as many voices to the table as possible. I'm hoping that through these conversations, people will connect and be like, man, I loved what he was saying. I'm going to reach out to him or her.
Yeah, that's great. That's great. See, I hear somebody very excited in the background.
Yeah, I want Mama. Oh, poor guy.
We should go then. Okay.
Yeah.
But it's been a great chat. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Jonti. I hope you have a great evening.
You too.
I need Mama. Okay.
Go, Mom. I can't.
I'll talk to you in DMs afterward. Thank you again. Please send my salams to your wife.
You too.
And again, thank you so much, everybody. Please follow Jonti. Join his conversation. It's well worth it. His content is great. I highly recommend following his page. It's fantastic. And yeah, I'm looking forward to more of what you have to say. And maybe we'll do a part 2 down the road at some point.
Sounds awesome. Sounds
All
great.
right.
All right. Take care.
All right. Thank you. You too, Jonti.
Bye-bye.
Wassalam.